Hi, welcome to the New Voting Project. My name is Kanal, your host, and today we are very honored to have Sarah Bryant on the show. No relation to Kobe Bryant, just want to make that very clear to the viewers, although that would be really cool. Uh, but you are the Director of Outreach at Georgetown Votes, also a fellow at the Andrew Goodman Foundation and Vote Everywhere. You are a student and senior at Georgetown University, which is great, so you're almost graduating and you're at the School of Foreign Service. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I know college students are
Yeah.
super busy, but thank you. Of
Yeah, thanks so much for having me and for the great introduction. I'm excited to be on the show today.
course. All right, so let's get into these questions. Just basics, for an introduction wise. Talk a little bit about your background. What your aspirations are. How's school going? That should be a pretty nice, easy question to start off with, something like that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, just a little about me. I am from Nashville, Tennessee. Lived there all growing up, and then, of course, as you said, came to Georgetown now for college. Was always pretty interested in politics, but had no idea what I wanted to do with that. So, ended up here in the School of Foreign Service, and I'm a major in international politics
Mm.
with a minor in Latin American studies. So, doing a bit of everything here in the SFS, but like you said, I'm a senior. I'm really close to graduating, which is crazy. Writing a thesis this year. It's been a lot of work, but a really exciting time because I think what's so great about college, and especially for me, college Georgetown, is it's really given me a chance to explore so many things that I'm interested in, and also to get a lot of really practical skills for whatever it is I do next. I'm particularly interested in international development, but we'll see where that ends up. Like I said, I do have a passion for politics right here in the US as well. So getting a bit of that foreign policy. But with everything I've gotten to work on in college as a member of GU Votes, the voting rights group on campus, it's gotten me really interested just in activism generally, which I think being able to do that here in the university setting has prepared me so well for whatever it is I do next.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you just answered a whole bunch of questions. No, that sounds great. No, I'm glad that college. I've been told. See, I'm still a high school senior. I've been told is an amazing place to get involved and active in your community. And the fact that
Yeah.
you did Georgetown Votes, I mean, that's great. Encouraging college students to start that habitual cycle is something we talk about on this show all the time. So thank you so much for that. And on that note, let's talk about the work that you've done with Georgetown Votes. Kind of run through what the organization does, what you specifically do for them, the roles and responsibilities, and the core values you're trying to amplify at Georgetown.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a little background on GU Votes itself. So, the group was actually founded in 2016 in advance of that election by some students on campus, just with the goal of getting, I think they set a number. They wanted like 2,000 GU votes, which was 2,000 students who were going to pledge to vote and they would know would go out into the election. For context, our university is pretty small. We're about 7,000 undergrads. So it wasn't like a super ambitious goal, but they knew there was nothing like that on campus. And they saw a need for students who were really passionate about making sure their peers knew to go out and vote, and they would be really engaged in the election. So since then, the group has definitely grown a bit in what we do. Our just general mission, we're a nonpartisan student-led initiative working to enhance the voting culture at Georgetown by simplifying the voting process, increasing turnout rates among students, and directly integrating voter registration into the university ecosystem. So with that, I think there's kind of two sides to it, because on one side we do, direct work with students in terms of voter education. We might have events where we bring speakers on different issues about voting. But then at the same time, we do a lot of advocacy just at the university level. So working with campus administration to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible for students to vote. So making sure that the university provides resources, whether that's um, having our voting portal linked on the main student website where students register for classes and do everything else, or whether that's having official emails sent out to every student about how to vote in the upcoming election. So we do a little mix of everything. And I was lucky enough to get involved with GU Votes as early as my freshman year. I was a freshman in the fall of 2018, so there were midterm elections happening that fall.
Right.
And I just got involved volunteering at one of their voter registration drives. So, I mean, I think that just goes to show like you might start with just a little thing. I was just sitting at a table helping register students to vote. And I was like, "Hey, this is really awesome. I want to do more. I want to get more involved." So um, we have rotating leadership, and so eventually I was able to apply, and then came into my current role as director of outreach, which basically means I help with all our outreach to different student groups. So forming those partnerships with other student organizations, as well as campus administration, like I said, to those different offices. And I think you mentioned, like, what some of our core values are. And I'd say that a lot of it stems from, this stereotype that we see. I mean, it happens about high schoolers, it happens about college students. People say, "Oh, youth are so cynical. They're apathetic. They don't turn out to vote in elections." And it's true, youth do have historically lower turnout rates than older voters. But at GU, that's we're like, this isn't because youth don't care. Youth are really passionate about different issues, but there's a lot of either one, barriers to actually getting to the polls and casting your vote,
Yeah.
or two, messages that people are receiving that say your vote doesn't matter. It's not going to make a difference.
Mhm.
So we really want to counter that on campus by creating a culture around voting and around the importance of voting. A couple other things that are important to us: we do see voting as a nonpartisan issue. So we work with college Dems, we work with college Republicans, and it's really awesome, especially when we do voter registration drives, to have students come together from both sides of the political spectrum, because we know it's so important that despite how politicized voting rights is, we do want to hopefully be able to mobilize students from whatever political position they're coming from on our campus. Um, and so that's really where we're coming from. Happy to answer more questions about the specifics of our work, but we're really just here to support students in whatever ways we can, and create that long term commitment from the university to promote student voter engagement.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm glad it's a nonpartisan initiative, right? Because we see it's such a partisan divisive issue now on specifically one side of the aisle that are passing
Hmm.
these, voter restriction laws and oppression on certain minority communities. So it's great to hear that college students involved at any level of the spectrum, right? Because it's absolutely overloaded at this point.
Right.
um, come together and discuss and vote. Of course, that's the goal to get out and vote. And
Hmm.
you had mentioned this organization came to fruition, post or within the 2018 midterms. That's when you got activated, but it was started back in 2016. I
Yeah.
myself was activated in 2016. I started watching the news. It was like, what the, you know,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
were some things that definitely changed that year for a
Absolutely.
lot of us. What lessons do you think you learned from the 2020 elections? Obviously, you know, hyperpolarization, once in a century pandemic, you're online learning, you're voting top to bottom for presidential down ballot initiatives. Everything was crazy, right? What lessons could you draw from that year and from your work at GU Votes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 2020 election really, I think, from the G votes perspective, tested us in a lot of ways, because we were very excited going in. 2020, the year started for all of us so strong. We were very excited about ramping up everything for Super Tuesday, and then going into the actual elections in November. And then, of course, with the COVID pandemic, everything, it changed for everyone. And for us, it meant that we were entirely virtual that semester. So
Right.
our usual strategies of like hold a voter registration drive, like go table at different places on campus, it's not going to be the same as it was before. And it forced us to get really creative. And I think one thing that was good about that, so a challenge that we have here, or that we have at Georgetown, especially when students are all physically in DC, is that DC, of course, is not a state, doesn't have representatives, and DC statehood is a whole nother issue I could get into, because
Yeah,
it
that's a
truly is a
separate
voting right
podcast.
issue,
That's just
a
a
whole
separate
nother
podcast. Yeah,
podcast,
that's just a separate podcast.
exactly.
Yeah.
But because of that, a lot of Georgetown students choose to register to vote at their permanent address. So I'm registered in Tennessee, even though I'm here as a Georgetown student on campus in DC. And so we really have to do outreach for all 50 states, and especially with students then being at home to
Wow.
vote. It really, we were trying to figure out how do we get accurate and timely information, especially with all the new restrictions regarding COVID. We ended up, long story short, partnering with a campus office to send state specific emails to every student saying, this is your state's deadline. Here's what changed because of COVID. So a lot of it was just that information gathering. But I think what we really learned too was that forming partnerships with groups that like aren't explicitly political, or that you might not think of as the usual groups being involved in like politics, was really important. Like we had a partnership with campus athletics.
Mhm.
And the athletics teams got into this whole competition saying who can get to 100% voter registration on their teams. And it was super fun. So, I mean, to translate that into a non college campus setting, I think it's, when we think about mobilizing voters and engaging voters, it's not just the people who are, already involved in a political group or already engaged, which those are obviously the easiest people to work with, but really when we had to get creative and really think outside the box of like how we were working with different groups, like that was super important. I think just more generally too, like you mentioned, like the levels of polarization that were such a challenge in 2020, we really saw the importance of like one, using like local, like very trusted networks to combat misinformation. Cause on a college campus, we are a very liberal campus, so I don't think we had as many challenges with that. But just being at home and in my home community of Nashville, I definitely saw like the challenges in terms of helping people be able to trust that the election was legitimate, that it was going to have legitimate results. And just having those conversations on an individual level with people to try to communicate with them was a huge challenge. And then also just having spaces to facilitate like those conversations across partisan divides was something that we tried to do a bit. Not necessarily GU Votes, but just other groups on campus tried to facilitate. And I do think it was a really important thing. But like you said, I mean, 2020 really emphasized, I think, all of those challenges, and I don't have all the answers, but it definitely was like a very useful time, I think, to challenge ourselves to really think like all these new things we would usually use as the tools of voter engagement might not work anymore, and where do we go from here? And I think that innovation like is here to stay in terms of like outreach and social media and digitally, and all of the, Zoom is here with us still, but not necessarily a bad thing, because I think it really did help us out in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, I thought I was way more productive when I was online.
Yeah.
I was running like 3 campaigns and doing homework and going to Zoom class. I mean,
Crazy how much time you have. You don't have to travel places either.
yeah, no, you're just at home, Zoom call, you know. No, but I completely understand the approach. And I didn't know, right? DC statehood, I never brought that into perspective. You have to deal with 50 states, sometimes even international students. I don't even
Mhm.
know how to get started when it comes to international voting procedures. I don't know anything
Right.
about that. Uh, wow, no, that's
Yeah. No, when we're always learning, that's something I love about, getting to do this work on a college campus. I mean, I'll have students like we'll always acknowledge as leaders of the group, we don't have all the answers, of course, but we'll find the information that we need. And that's part of our role, is just to be that liaison for students to make it more approachable, that they can ask us and they don't have the time to go find it themselves. But like we'll have students who will say, "Oh, I'm a US citizen, but I lived abroad until I went to college, and now I don't know, how do I register to vote? Where do I register to vote? How do I get that documentation?" And so it's really just helping students work through those questions that I never even would have thought to ask, but it's been totally eye opening.
Yeah, no. One thing I say to a lot of, beyond just running for office and voting, I say to a lot of people is we are sold convenience at every level, right? We
Hmm.
want, we want to get from place A to B. Well, you either look at public transportation and say that's my convenience, right? That's my convenience.
Right.
Same way, if I give a student all the information, all the documentation, the rules and procedures, and exactly how to register to vote, then they're going to vote. And that's exactly what
Exactly.
we see leaders in voting rights doing, right? We are
Hmm.
Stacey Abrams is the example I point to. She didn't reinvent a wheel. She started turning the wheel. She started giving folks information, places to be, ballot locations, ballot drop offs, and maybe you're disabled, so we're going to help you go drop off your ballot, right? That's the kind of service that's required, and GU votes are doing the same thing. I mean, that's what that we need more of that. To be frank.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and on that note, I'm gonna ask a very simple, very, very simple question.
Hmm.
It's a yes or no. If you have another answer, I'd really love to hear it. I'm genuinely interested.
All right.
Um, is voting important?
Absolutely.
Okay,
My answer is yes.
yeah, there it is.
Yes,
We
but
can end. Let's end the show. I mean,
and
that's
here,
I know.
no, I genuinely do. I really do think voting matters and voting is very important. But I will say, like I said before, I mean, young voters get so many messages being thrown at them that, your vote's one of millions, or
I know.
it's young people look at the leadership in our country and they think, well, my vote actually changed how they're voting on legislation, on how they're doing different things. And I definitely understand that perspective, because it is easy to get very cynical about, why does voting matter? What is the impact of my vote? But when I think about it, I mean, on one hand, yes, voting is a really important way to influence policy, especially in local elections, because who we elect at the local level are the people who are making the changes to, police funding or how our education system works. And so, in that sense, your vote really does have an impact. But
Right.
more symbolically, I mean, when we think about what we care about is the US being a democracy, having a democratic system, voting is like that bedrock responsibility. And I think when we vote and when we vote consistently, I think of it as like you're building this habit of participation that like all your other civic engagement builds on. So voting is one tool in that toolbox you have, whether you are really passionate about like going to protest for an issue or calling your Congress people or doing other things that are about holding your leaders accountable. Like voting is where that all starts. And I think when we dismiss the importance of voting, that's, we're losing that foundation that we need to have for everything else that young people are doing to be involved politically.
Right. I often say it's a currency we can all afford as
Hmm.
citizens. Um, and I mean, and the other side of the argument, in contrast, is well, for voting, it's not the silver bullet. It's not
Yeah,
the end all be all. It is simply like you said, the civic responsibility we hold that creates the foundation of the nation, right? And especially at the local level, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I worked in local politics for like 2
yeah,
years. I know exactly what local elections are capable of changing. Especially, I host a lot of candidates on the show, so they'll talk about their priorities for the community, and that's I think required, right, to spread that awareness. But then again, it's not the first it's the first thing I recommend, but as a campaigner, I can tell you I'll give you thousands of more jobs to do after you vote, because there's
yeah,
plenty of ways to get involved, and GU Votes is obviously one of them. So I always come back to that, right? Voting
yeah.
is central to every issue there is, every single issue, climate change, criminal justice reform. If your leader is not acting on behalf of what you believe in, well, goddamn, you probably voted for them or you didn't vote for them, and that's why they're there,
Exactly.
right? Uh, but yeah, that's enough of that. This is my inspirational for the day. There's only one every day, so that's I filled the quota.
The perfect number.
Exactly. Let's talk about states like Georgia, tax
Sure.
right, voter suppression laws. Again, feel free to speak freely. Um, what are your thoughts on Georgia passing Senate Bill 202 or Texas now also targeting, women's reproductive rights in addition to voting rights restrictions? Thoughts on gerrymandering, communities being isolated, and we've seen that historically as a trend in this country, right? So just walk me through how you're responding as a citizen, as a young person entering the workforce, as a student right now. Just walk me through how you're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so concerning to see, particularly the voting rights legislation that occurred right after the 2020 election, because what we saw is that the groups that had record turnout, be that minority voters, young voters, were being targeted now by these new restrictive laws. And so you can see how politicized it is that people who felt like they lost because of this turnout now want to turn around and restrict those who might vote them out of office when really these officials need to be changing their policies, not trying to change who the voters are. And so of course, that's very concerning, and it's often hard to know what we can do. The other thing that we really had talked about a lot, I know as an organization with GU Votes too, is the false narratives about voter fraud that like underlie a lot of the like restrictive voter rights laws, because what we know is that there was no evidence of widespread
My
voter fraud after the 2020
Jesus
election.
Christ. Yeah. And
Yeah,
and let me tell you this from a Californian perspective, shout out to all the Californians who listen on the show.
hmm,
We just went through a recall. I had Larry Elder screaming voter fraud before the election even happened. Right.
exactly,
And I got the results today. They were certified literally today. The same amount, 61.9% voted for Governor Gavin Newsom back in 2018. It was the same percentage of voters that voted to keep him in this 2021 recall. So it was
exactly.
insane that they were calling, voter legitimacy, voter fraud. That's a very partisan tactic. It's so
Yes,
it's
and
so
it's
petty. It's so
it's so
petty.
concerning too, because
Yeah.
it just undermines trust in elections and in the very act of voting, which yeah, it's so unproductive. And we see it happening with gerrymandering too, which is happening in a lot of legislatures. I know it's an issue in Texas. For me personally, it's concerning in Tennessee as well. I know the Tennessee state legislature right now is considering splitting the district that Nashville is in into multiple districts, which would end up Nashville is one of the two districts currently represented by a Democrat in Congress, and splitting that vote could mean that our representation gets split, and we may not have a Democratic representative in Congress anymore. So personally, as someone who votes for the Democratic candidate, it's concerning to see this happening, and in terms of trying to split that vote in Nashville. And I know that kind of gerrymandering is
Yeah.
happening in
Gotta
places
get out and
across the
campaign if that
country.
happens.
I know. I
Yeah,
need to go back home and start lobbying my legislators. But yeah, that's what
yeah,
I was gonna turn to then, because you think about this and it's like, well, what do I do? Like, what power do I actually have to change these laws that are being passed? And I mean, it's hugely daunting. But like you said, I mean, at the local level, it's incredible the groups that are involved. I mean, Fair Fight just won, of course, with Stacey Abrams in Georgia, like you mentioned. I mean, she's like our dream speaker for G votes. So if we could have her on campus,
yeah.
that
And
would be
Stacy, if you're listening to this, hey,
come to Georgetown.
no, don't come to Georgetown. Come to the new voting project, and then
Okay,
I'll
and
send
then
you to Georgetown,
Georgetown.
and
We'll
then I'll
get her
send
at
you to
both.
Georgetown. All right,
Right,
there
right.
we go.
But there's so many great advocacy groups, even smaller ones that we may not have
And
heard about nationally.
Andrew Goodman Foundation. Hey, that's I,
Absolutely.
I have Every Vote Counts, Campus Vote Project, Students Lead, Students Vote, Vote.org. I could go on. It's
Hmm.
a laundry list of organizations that work together and build coalitions to preserve voting rights.
Yeah.
And even the ACLU,
And the
right, who's preserving
right.
at the legal level.
And the great thing now too about the fact that we're so much more connected virtually, I think, than we've ever been before. I'll get emails from groups that are saying, maybe you don't live in Virginia, but if you're really passionate about this, you can help phone bank to call Virginia voters. You can help you get out the vote in these other ways. So I mean, even if you're living somewhere where you're like, well, I'm not really concerned about my local issue, maybe you live in an area where you're not concerned about your voting rights being restricted. There's so much you can do, even for places across the country, if you're really passionate and wanting to get involved, which is awesome.
Yeah, most definitely. And I kind of want to close on a question I ask every guest that comes on the show, which is, what is your advice, your recommendation for the next generation, Gen Z? You're Gen Z, right? I think so.
I am. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, me too. And again, just as a disclaimer, as always, I don't know what Gen Z means. I was told it refers to our generation. I don't know what it means,
Who
how it
knows?
was made. What the hell is the Z for? I get the Gen part.
Right.
Why can't I be
Couldn't tell
Gen
you.
or Gen K? Hey, I mean, I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, but what is your advice to folks like me? Almost, we have the ability to vote now, or folks 16, 17-year-olds who are waiting, who are trying to be engaged, or maybe the alienated ones, maybe the 22-year-old that doesn't vote on campus, right? What are your thoughts? What are your advice for us being the graduating class of voters, right, who are going to
Hmm.
change the next decade in this country, hopefully?
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. And I mean, to start out with, for those who are too young to vote, I mean, what I always think is you're never too young to stay educated about the issues you care about and what's affecting your community. And I think the way that I honestly got interested in politics was through, mock government programs in high school, through youth in government, through Model UN, through all of those programs. And it really opened my eyes to, like, what can we do, practically speaking, to have an impact in our local communities. And I think even starting there is so awesome, for high school students who maybe aren't able to vote yet. And I know even like some, in a more like actual government sense, some boards of education or other local youth councils have ways for students to get involved. So definitely look for that, even if you are not old enough to vote yet. And for all of those who are, finally turning 18, this really is the moment to get involved. We've got midterms right around the corner. The very least you can do is to vote, but if you can volunteer for a campaign, to do all those other things you were talking about, because like you said, voting is not the silver bullet, but it is that starting point for all of us, I think. And it's really exciting because I do think that youth are especially aware of how important it is at this moment, due to things like the COVID pandemic, due to all these other, really big issues that are opening our eyes to how much it matters to be involved in politics. And then I would also just say a general advice to everyone is, and especially to those who maybe think why vote anymore, is that change doesn't happen overnight, and it's a hard thing to be patient. But when we are persistent and committed, I think those are two attributes that really will take you far in terms of political engagement. Because voting in one election, maybe it's not the outcome you want. You work on a campaign, and the candidate doesn't win, that's really hard. But in order to actually make a difference on all the issues we care about, we have to stay in this for the long run because it really is a lifetime of work. And I think we can see change in our lifetime, but it takes that patience and determination and persistence. And I think young people have it in them to have that resilience and to say, you know what, like it's our time, it's our generation. And even if it doesn't happen tomorrow, it will happen in our futures and we're gonna make it happen. So, stay in the game and yeah, it's exciting because
Right.
there
Yeah.
really are so many people doing the work already.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll address there is I'll get calls, and I'll be on calls with like city council members, very, very like local electeds, and they'll tell me, if you come to me when I'm deciding the city budget, or if I'm deciding the police budget or police oversight committee, if you come to me the day before, right? If you procrastinate and come to me
Hmm.
the day of the city council meeting or the day before, I can't do much because that thing has taken 2 years or 3 years to
Exactly.
form. If I'm talking about a city plan or a climate action plan, that or a development that was proposed and zoned 5 years ago was starting now, and you're now just realizing it's going to increase your traffic and your kid can't get to school, in 20 minutes. Well, you should have came to me then, right? And it's not to say we blame people for not having, folks are busy, folks are tired, folks are working, right? Folks are dealing with the pandemic, but
Hmm.
avenues to get involved, GU votes.
There are. And even if it's one thing, just to be showing up for that one thing, like consistently, like you said, some policies are years in the making. And, even if you're showing up now and it's not high on the agenda, what you're saying to a local council member or to some other representative could make a difference down the line in a way you don't even realize. So it's like you said, I know that time and resources are so limited for all of us, but it's those little things and being consistent about it that can make all the difference.
Yeah, 100%. No, and thank you so much for that. How can viewers stay updated on what you do with GU votes? If you want to link your socials, this is about time. This is the only time you get to promote yourself, so use it wisely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if students are interested in GU Votes, they can find us on Instagram at GU Votes on all platforms. I would also plug again, you mentioned the Andrew Goodman Foundation. And for people who haven't heard of that, it is a national voting rights group that works with students on tons of college campuses. They actually just launched a specific program working with historically Black colleges and universities, which is really cool, and just a whole wide range of colleges. So if you're about to be a college student or are currently a college student, definitely check them out too. I believe they're just at Andrew Goodman Foundation, or you can find their website because if they don't have a chapter on your campus, they're probably interested in expanding to your campus. So never hesitate to get in touch, and they can provide stipends, they provide activity budgets to schools. So if you're, needing the resources, needing the advice to actually start something like GU Votes, they have tons of knowledge and resources. So I'll plug them even more than I plug us because they really have got it going on and have the knowledge and, like I said, the resources to really make things happen on college campuses.
Yeah. The one caveat to that is you now must follow me back on Twitter. Big on
Of
Twitter.
course.
Uh, but no, please do follow at GU Votes and the Andrew Goodman Foundation. Got several of my close friends that work with the Andrew Goodman Foundation. Great work they do, nonpartisan. And no, but again, thank you so much for coming on the show. To appreciate the insight, the time. I know you're a college student, super busy. But thank you. I think most folks will find it helpful to understand how important it is to vote from somebody who is Gen Z, right? The
Yeah,
students got to lead students. I'm telling you. Uh,
exactly.
but no, thank you so much, and I do wish you the best of luck on your senior thesis, uh, and of course your future endeavors.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Best of luck with your senior year as well.
Oh man, don't even remind me. Take care.